Hello and welcome to the Petey Performance Podcast. Today's episode of the podcast is a conversation with sports psychologist Jessie Barr and former athlete herself who competed in London 2012. We talk a lot about sports psychology, a lot about dealing with defeat, having been knocked out in the championship yesterday, our senior panel. So we talked a little bit about that and about debriefing the year or going through an annual review and a plan for the next year, when you should do that, how you should process and deal with emotions. Then we talked about developing coping strategies with athletes. We talked about connecting with athletes, using anecdotes, and how Jessie would have approached her career differently if she'd known what she knows now. So, great episode for you guys. I hope you enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, please remember to like it, share it, and send it. Jessie Barr, welcome to the PD Performance Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Delighted to be here, Sport Ireland campus. Not in the Institute, not in your usual spot, but we're just saying there that this is a bit of a throwback. You used to present here.
Yes.
So hopefully our voices carry well over the course of the podcast, and we can provide some insights for athletes and coaches that are going to be tuned in because they want to learn, I suppose. So
I hope so.
What's the day looking like today? You were saying earlier you have had a meeting and you have another meeting later on. Yeah,
so today is Monday. I'm giving away the days. I don't know if that's what you're meant to do in a podcast, but yeah, so usually I'm not actually here on campus on a Monday. Usually this is kind of my admin, planning kind of a day. Tuesdays I actually work at the Sports Surgery Clinic in Santry, so I'm kind of a referral pathway for surgery patients, specifically knee surgery. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm either working from home or on campus for institute-specific work. So this week, there's a lot of kind of reviews. I did one review already with badminton, one of the sports I work with, kind of like a roundtable meeting with all the support staff, just to kind of discuss the year up until now, because it's so often up in the institute, we all the staff work across so many different sports, that it's hard to kind of keep up with that, what everyone's doing with each athlete. So it's good to get those roundtables in a couple of times a year. And then I have a debrief, set of athlete debriefs this evening with the academy sailing group. So they're the kind of development level group. Again, kind of review of the season kind of thing. There's a lot of that going on at the moment.
Are they one-on-one or in a group?
This will be in a group. So this will be the support team, so like the coach, the head coach, myself, and whichever the other support staff are available, maybe their S&C or their conditioning coach, and then each athlete one by one to kind of go through and review how they've performed between training and competition, because with a view to see can they stay on the academy, which more often than not they do. But that's we're kind of at the end of season for a lot of sports at the moment, so a lot of reviews, a lot of end-of-year reviews, planning for next season has been going on at the moment. The only sport that I'm working with that's still kind of in season is gymnastics. They've got their World Championships in October, so big opportunity for Olympic qualification at the moment. So it's kind of strange that most of my work now is end-of-season planning, but there's still a little bit of like planning for the main part of the season as well. So that's what kind of the week's looking like.
In relation to the end of year review and the planning, obviously, in order to improve and to go better next year, you're going to have to be pretty candid and pretty honest in those meetings. The athletes are.
Yeah.
How are you attempting to facilitate honesty within those meetings from both athlete and coach without letting it fly off the wall? Because sometimes it needs to be some brutal honesty, but it's the delivery of the information as well that is quite important, obviously, to maybe further enhance what you can do in the future. Because sometimes if you deliver the message in a certain way, it's not conducive to actually improving. It's just for the sake of delivering it.
Yeah, like my presence is, because obviously I suppose the work I'm doing with the athlete can be quite separate to the coach sometimes, depending on what, obviously from a confidentiality point of view, sometimes what they're sharing with me doesn't go beyond there, sometimes it does. Like you said, I'm facilitating. So my presence is there to maybe add, and kind of say, oh, well, this maybe was presented as a challenge last year, maybe how that hasn't come up, kind of giving my spin on things, my, kind of my opinion. But sometimes it is managing, like you said, that emotion. That it can, sometimes you feel, I had one recently, I felt the athlete was coming a little bit in on defense, because it's like, we don't usually do this. Why is this happening now? But it's because the year that's in it, there's a big opportunity. We don't want any mistakes or things that didn't go well to affect our progress next year. So it actually ended up being a really productive meeting, but there was definitely a feeling of defensiveness, and it was a lot of me kind of, talking to coach, talking to athlete, talking to them. So it's facilitation. It's kind of guiding the conversation without being the leader in any of those senses. I'm not usually the leader in that instance. It's just offering my opinion, offering a way of phrasing things, so it very much depends on each group and how embedded I am with them, what the relationship is with the coach, what the relationship with the athlete. So you kind of have to read it as you go.
Obviously, we can't go into specifics, but when somebody starts feeling defensive or getting defensive, it's because they're protecting themselves. It's a protective kind of response.
Yeah.
When that wall goes up, how are you generally trying to, let's not say break that wall down, but let's say take pieces off that wall so that they can be a little bit more honest and open and feel trusted and valued in that moment enough to be honest and open and not just put up the wall to protect themselves?
I suppose sometimes the first thing is to kind of nearly acknowledge, look, I know feels a bit confrontational, that it's two staff members and you, or it's, staff versus you, but that's not the case. So sometimes laying the kind of ground rules from the start and saying the purpose of this is for all of us to kind of be open and honest, you as well. Because I think sometimes there's the idea that like the staff are just going to tell me everything and I'm not going to have my say, but it's making it really clear that the athlete will have their say and this is their opportunity to air any grievances, to acknowledge anything that they want to change as well from their point of view. Because I think the defensiveness comes when it feels like you feel you're going to be the one that's just flaws are pointed out, or I'm going to be told what to do. But actually it's a really open chance to air out the things that have been going well, the things that are not going well. So, and sometimes it's acknowledging, like I said, that I'm noticing, look, I can see you're getting a bit defensive. I would be in that situation too, but just bear with us. I know it feels a bit uncomfortable at the moment. And sometimes it is just acknowledging it and kind of saying, look, I know how you're probably feeling. Are you feeling like that? If you want to stop, kind of giving the outs as well, not feeling that they're feeling trapped. But yeah, I think it really, you have to it depends on how you can read the situation. And that's kind of the key to it, is reading the situation. It is an uncomfortable situation for anyone to be sitting there feeling that they're in review. No one wants to have to do that, and kind of acknowledging that from the start, that like this might be a bit uncomfortable. There might be some kind of things that are a little bit sticky to deal with, but think of the benefit that if we can get past that, what that could mean for your performance going forward. So
that's how you're framing it, I guess.
Trying to anyway, yeah.
But you obviously, when you say, I know potentially how you're feeling, you're speaking from experience.
Yeah.
How much do you almost lean on anecdotes and things like that to connect with the athlete and to show that, look, potentially this happened to me down the line. Now, this is not about me, it's about you. But I felt similarly when I was going through this or a similar situation.
Yeah, I find it really helpful. Maybe not always in the debrief situation. I didn't have as much of those maybe, but definitely just generally I find it can be really helpful to kind of break down some barriers. Like I'm not kind of trying to just make it all about me, obviously, but you, like you said, using anecdotes to kind of say, well, this is, sometimes if maybe the athlete's struggling to articulate how they're feeling in a certain situation, that, because obviously it can be very hard to articulate an emotion. So helping them put words to what they're feeling, tell me how you're feeling in the lead up to a performance. Like you're about to go out on the pitch, or you're about to go out on the track, or you're about to go out into the pool. Tell me what you're feeling. Like, at that stage, I might have been feeling like this. If they're kind of, you can see they're kind of going, what am I thinking about in that stage? And what do I feel? Because obviously it's very hard when you're not in that context to kind of bring yourself to how you're feeling. So sometimes I might say, actually, when I was in the call room, would have been a really particularly challenging time for me because I didn't have music as a distraction. I'm sitting there with all my teammates or with all my competitors, so I would have noticed my heart rate and I would have had to control my breathing, and these are the things that might have gone through my head. Do you feel like that? And they either agree and say, actually I feel like that, or say, no, I don't really. And either is helpful because it can help to kind of guide the conversation. And I think it's been really helpful in developing relationships with the athletes, because they do feel, okay, she gets it, she's been there, she's done that, she knows what I'm talking about. And it's not that if you haven't been at that level that you can't do that with an athlete. It might just take that bit longer for them to feel they get where I'm coming from, or they get what I'm talking about. It's like skipping that step of gaining that understanding of what the challenge is of being in this high pressure situation. So yeah, it definitely is helpful, but I don't want to lean on it too much, but it's knowing when it's going to be applicable.
It's probably even a little bit is non-conscious in terms of you're probably using similar terminology that they're using. So then
Maybe.
they are thinking, oh, well, yeah, she gets it because
Yeah.
she understands this and this and this about the sport
Yeah.
in particular. In relation to those debrief sessions or the yearly review, you said there it's not something that you really experienced. What do you think is the benefit of doing so? And do you feel like potentially it would have been of benefit to you to do so when you were competing?
Yeah, so I did, I suppose, the extent of having a full round table of all different support staff, I didn't. I would have done them always with my coach, or did my own little one, but always with my coach. Kind of at the end of our off-season break, we'd usually sit down to debrief the year that's been and look ahead to the year that's to come, and I found that really, really beneficial. At the time when I actually was using the Institute services before I became jumped over the line to be a support service provider, I had some support, like I used physio support, but because I was based in UL in Limerick, I wasn't in the Institute that frequently, and the way it was set up then, it's grown a huge amount since I was an athlete, so there wasn't really the scope. Like I didn't have a big support team of the nutritionist, the S&C. Like I had an S&C in UL. I used physio up here and had my coach down there. So I just kind of did, maybe a bit of review here and there, but I didn't have that big round table with all those people because that team wasn't there. But I did really find the debrief helpful because, you kind of clarify, if you've had a bad season or you've ended on a bad note, it can be very easy for that last race to be the thing that you, I suppose, how you perceive the rest of the whole year and how that's gone. Or vice versa, if you had, a couple of good races, does that kind of overshadow all of the bits that I haven't been working on that well? And does it kind of make you not realize actually there's still a lot of work to do because you had a good few races or a few good performances? So it did help me when you're planning for next year because I needed someone to help rein me in. I would have been doing this, that, and the other, saying yes to everything. So I needed that kind of planning and that focus, and my coach to be on the same page with me from the start.
That does sound quite intimidating, though, that round table with everybody there.
It is intimidating. I do feel for the athlete, and I this review that we're going to be doing with sailing later is going to be on Zoom.
Okay.
But it's still intimidating because all of now there's not too many of us that work with them that maybe before, but it still is. Like they're young, some of them are 15, 16, up to 18. It's intimidating for an athlete of that age, but I think they're trying to, build those skills now that they're able to be okay with listening to that kind of feedback and taking on that kind of constructive criticism, because when they're a senior athlete and they haven't developed that skill, it's much more difficult.
It's also probably useful in terms of letting the athlete know that, look, we're all here for you. This is about you.
Yeah.
And it probably solves so many problems in regards to what may have happened in the past in people not being on the same page, because it's an opportunity for, as you said, the S&C coach, conditioning, physio, or sports psychologist, everybody is sitting down and just having a conversation. And I'd imagine there is a conversation both pre and post the athlete being there too.
Yeah.
And there's catch-ups and whatnot. And there's questions probably follow along after that in terms of when you were talking about this, what was that about? I wasn't too sure on that, or wasn't too clear on that. And maybe we were crossing wires a little bit in this. Maybe we should not do that next year, or at least attempt to not do that next year. A lot of the time, different facets of sports medicine or support don't talk to each other enough.
Yeah.
And the person that's impacted negatively as a result of that is the athlete.
100%. Yeah, because at the end of the day, they're the ones we're all working for. And sometimes it can be easy to forget that we are support service providers. And so, you kind of sometimes, because the athlete might be the last person, we might be having so many internal meetings about athlete X that you kind of go, when just making sure that's that kind of at the forefront, that the athlete is at the forefront of those conversations, that all of the support is to make that person better, that person behind the athlete. But yeah, and I think when I've been working in the Institute now since 2017, and I think I sometimes forget how what a brilliant service that we can offer, because there's not many places that athletes have access to all of their supports. They walk into that building and everyone's there. Like they could, if they were really organized, they could come in and do their training session, their gym, S&C, nutrition, physio, psychology, get all of that done in one day. And there's not many places that have that opportunity. So, you kind of forget how valuable that service that we can offer is for the athletes that walk in that door.
But only if it's working effectively and efficiently, and that only happens through constant, open and honest communication.
Yeah, and I think that's something we've definitely honed over the years. And I think about, obviously the pandemic was a really tough time, obviously, but we were working still, everything was on Zoom. And actually there's some really good habits with, internal team meetings within different sports that started during lockdown over Zoom and have continued either hybrid, in person, more often than not hybrid, because a lot of our staff don't all live in Dublin. And it's just, I used to find that sometimes if I just wasn't in on a Friday, I was missing out on the team meeting that used to happen in person for sport X. And now I'm there every week, because sometimes I can be in, sometimes I can't. And you just felt that you're always in the know of what's going on. You do that round, like some sports are really good, that round table that happens every week. Some happens less frequently just because of the demands of the sport. But, it's just, that was a gap that we probably didn't even realize that that was there until the pandemic happened and we were forced to use different means. And it's been really good for keeping that communication, because like I wouldn't have direct communication maybe with the S&C coach otherwise. Like that wouldn't probably happen as frequently as maybe me to the physio, for example.
When it's not scheduled and you're time restricted, it's easy to not do it.
Yeah, unless it's urgent.
Yeah, unless it's urgent. Then
you don't want to
crisis.
get to that stage.
No, you're trying to preempt it, I suppose, and try to limit the amount of crises that you have on a yearly basis, I suppose. But not to focus on debriefs too much, but obviously I spoke to you beforehand. Yeah. I'm coming in off the back of, a championship defeat yesterday for us. My boys, they were unfortunate and got knocked out of the championship, and so many emotions. It's I was even thinking yesterday, I was like, how must they be feeling if I'm feeling like this? Yeah. Now I know that I have a pretty strong locus of control, and my self-worth and identity is wrapped up a lot in my performance now as a coach, previously as an athlete. So it probably does hit me pretty hard. Yeah. But I'm just thinking now practically, because that's what I revert to, is like, okay, just nobody cares, work harder. When is the appropriate time for a debrief? Because me and the coaching staff were talking last night in the clubhouse, and we kept saying like, oh, well, now is not the time to be talking about it. And then we talk about it for 20 minutes. Yeah,
and you do anyway.
And then we're saying, look, we'll reassess in a week or so. But like, when do you find, like, after maybe a disappointing result or performance in a yearly campaign is an appropriate time when emotions have kind of leveled out a little bit?
So I think you need to let those emotions be felt. So like the day of is probably not a good time, but there's kind of ways of looking at it that you can do what we call like a hot wash, which is like within 48 hours, just get those raw emotions out. Because sometimes those initial raw emotions are important to capture as well. Like if everyone's feeling really angry, that's probably an important emotion to capture. Why is there so much anger about this defeat? So that kind of hot wash of what's the general feel within the camp. How's everyone generally feeling? Let's not go too deep, but what's the general feeling at the moment? And then maybe within a week or two, try and do a more deep dive kind of a debrief of like, okay, how is, what are we going to actually look at? What went well? Why did it go well? What are we going to do to capitalize on that going forward? And then obviously the what didn't go well, why didn't it go well? Was there stuff we could control about that? And it's important to kind of capture both sides and like do that really deep debrief once those initial emotions have had time to calm down, everyone has time to think, but not so long that you've kind of forgotten. And all you can remember then is that kind of overriding emotion of anger, frustration, kind of when you have had a time to kind of do your own little bit of evaluation, like don't leave it too long. is what I would say. You know, like I said, those initial emotions are important. You know, if you're all feeling a certain way, why? You know, there's always follow up, the kind of acknowledging what it is, or kind of capturing what's the general vibe in the camp. Why is that? Why is it that some of us are feeling angry and some are just sad? You know, why are the emotions different from staff to athletes? Or maybe are some of the players feeling this way and some not? You know, you said that maybe some people are more senior, so they might be looking at this as kind of towards the end of their career, whereas the others are maybe only starting, so they're like, we've loads of years of this. You know, it's interesting to kind of capture that, because that could have meaning for you guys as well.
And
it's just a suggestion, though.
I know, 100%.
Because I know it is raw, and you kind of think,
we've done it in the past in regards to seeking feedback from the players and from management, anonymous feedback generally, prior to a team meeting. Because when you go into a debrief with 30 players, like, it's very difficult to have everybody feel heard.
Yeah.
So having the work done prior to going into that meeting is obviously like so imperative if you're going to actually leave that meeting with people thinking like, okay, we made some progress there. This year might not have gone to plan, but that doesn't mean next year is not going to go to plan. But then, like, when you try and rationalize it in the moment, you're like, what stage of grief am I at now?
Yeah.
And like, I can only speak for myself, obviously, but from the few players that I was speaking to as well, it almost seemed like we bypassed a lot of stages and moved straight to the depressive stage yesterday.
Yeah.
And potentially because there was a bit of shock about it. But like, it's very important to instruct the players or let them know that, look, we might be at this stage now, but that doesn't mean you're not going to get angry at all. You can go back to anger and then back to bargaining and then go back to depression again. Like, and it's totally normal. But like, it's very difficult in a coaching position and it's probably the nature of the job that I just threw myself into trying to do that immediately, because that was my way of coping with it.
Of course, action.
Action. Let's act on it. But like, it is difficult when you haven't processed your own emotions to go and try to help others to process them too.
And that's where it's hard for you in maybe having someone more external or someone, because obviously I'm very embedded in the sports. You know, I work across a few different sports, and I am embedded with each of them. So I do feel, you know, an emotional attachment to everyone's performance, but they're not, if I was their coach, it'd probably be a very different story. So those, you know, so I say the ideal is those hot wash debriefs. More often than not, I'm not actually at the competition. I'm watching it on the live stream or on TV, and I'm sending the text later on or the next day saying, let me know if you want to catch up. And I might not hear back from the athlete for a week. So that's the ideal scenario. And more often than not doesn't happen like that. So it probably is the person who's close to them, like the coach, who's doing that. And that is really challenging. Like you said, if you're feeling emotional about the situation as well, and that emotion could be frustration with the athlete for not doing what was expected of them on the day. So, you know, that's, you know, there's no ideal scenario, but, you know, maybe by having those conversations, it can help you process as well. And actually sharing that there's no harm in sharing with the players that how you guys are feeling. Like, the management should share that as well. I think it's important because you are as invested as them, and you can be vulnerable with them. I think it's okay to be vulnerable and say, we're as upset as you guys are, we're as angry, or we're scratching our heads as much as you guys are. Let's work together to figure this out.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
It is important to show a bit of vulnerability. And I think
but it's hard.
I think it is hard, but I think they're aware as well.
They can probably see it by you.
Even without saying it, I know some of them that maybe weren't feeling that way, or maybe were even masking it. We're making an attempt to try to up the vibe, I guess, a little bit. And you can't blame them as well. Because I did think for a while this morning, okay, I've moved to acceptance, but I don't think I have yet.
It's still very fresh. It was yesterday.
Yeah, I know. I know. But I'm always going to be like that, action, because that's kind of my nature. And it's probably to my detriment as well at times. But that's why I wanted to ask. We're talking about athletes a lot here.
Yeah.
Do any coaches ever reach out and ask for coping strategies around their stress levels, even in the competition? Let's not talk post-competition only, but like they obviously are humans too, and they have emotions. And
Absolutely.
there should be some psychological strategies that can help them in the moment too.
They don't reach out as much as you think. I haven't had a huge amount of that. And, you'll offer it and kind of say, if there's anything I can do, because you can see how stressful it is for like a head coach who's trying to probably managing logistics as well as, as people management as well as like the actual performance management, which is that what you signed up for as a coach, to manage all of these aspects? Probably not, but you probably are expected to do that. So no, it's something that we offer, but how much it's taken on board is less so. But there is supports within the Institute and there's a program called PEP, which is, I'm going to get the acronym wrong, so I'm not going to try and say, but it is a support program for coaches. And I think as part of that, there is access to kind of psych support from like a performance point of view that's offered from someone who's kind of external to the Institute. Because maybe what the difficulty is working, if the psychologist, like for me, working with their group of athletes, it might be hard to then be the one to come and bring your concerns as well. So I think having that external kind of support is probably helpful. So it's for coaches who are kind of moving into more of a head coach role or getting going in their coaching. This program is offered to them, and I think that's where they can access those kind of supports. And there's a lot of peer support then within that. So I think that's probably where they're accessing it, rather than from someone like me, where it might be kind of, you're kind of like, I'm talking to them about my athletes and now I'm offloading. Maybe they see it as kind of a little bit of a conflict.
But then in relation to that, like, you wouldn't just say to an athlete that's just starting out or just taking on a new role in the team that, okay, you should do sports psych, or at least focus on it now and then forget about it then when you get established. So it should be more of an ongoing thing for probably more coaches, like you just said, than are availing of the service.
Yeah.
Do you think that, and I'm thinking out loud here, a lot of it potentially comes down to them having a strong locus of control and wanting to believe that, no, I'm fine, I can do it.
Yeah.
I'm the head coach here. I need to know everything. I need to be able to guide this team or guide this athlete towards their highest form of self-realization. And I'm going to be able because that's who I am. And they're always telling themselves that. So then they all not obviously, but potentially push it to a side and it's like, I don't need that because I'm fine. Similarly to some athletes too as well.
There's a lot of athletes. Yeah, potentially. And I think once they've gone through that program, I don't think it's that the support's not offered. I don't know enough about that program to say, but there definitely is. And I remember there was a webinar, it could have been still during lockdown, where it was kind of to help us understand, I suppose, the psychological challenges and the challenges of being a head coach. And a lot of it was stress and working long hours and taking your work home and never really getting to switch off. So it was a really good eye-opener of things that we kind of knew as support staff, but kind of maybe didn't really think about, and recognizing that, every single head coach is bringing their work home after the competition. They're then going through and analyzing and thinking about, thinking and never letting go. So absolutely they could do with the support, but like an athlete, you can't force someone at the end of the day. You can't force it. You can make sure that they understand the support's there and what it could do to benefit them. But like anyone, you have to let them engage. Which could be the biggest challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not through any fault of their own. They don't know any other way.
No.
Because that's what they've seen, that's what they experience, and that's what they've been taught. Yeah. So it's like, if you're a head coach, you should be stressed. If you're not stressed, you're doing something wrong. Might be the mentality that they think. And
potentially,
it's like, why am I so relaxed here?
Yeah.
Like, we have a big competition next month.
Yeah.
How do you think we attempt to try to reframe that or change it? Because I know it's a massive thing, but
I suppose the best way to try and reframe anything is to try and highlight the potential benefits of performance. Same way as how you highlight the support, support services that an athlete might be a little bit resistant to. How could this help their performance? What are the areas that you think are, a hindrance to your performance at the moment? Okay, where are the gaps? What are the things that could help improve? I think it's the same with coaches. It's like, okay, you've said that you're working very long hours, you are bringing your work home, you're not sleeping well when you go away to competitions, and you're burnt out by the time you've come away from a championship. What are the things that someone else could support you with? Managing your stress levels. Is there some delegation you could do, so you're not taking all of this extra work back with you. So I think same thing. It's like, how could your performance benefit from accessing other supports that could be available to you? Otherwise, no, people are not going to be willing to, people in elite sports especially, I'll do it if it's going to help me. If this will help my performance, I'll do it. But if there isn't a guaranteed, this will definitely help, if someone's already a little bit resistant, if there's not a definite kind of, link between me doing this and the benefit to my performance, it's going to be very hard. So I think it's kind of identifying how could this actually have a benefit on your performance as a head coach, and then in turn your athletes. Like, if you're stressed and you're burnt out, what's that doing to the athletes that you're turning up to every day? Are they turning up and your mood is a little bit inconsistent? They don't know which version of coach is turning up today on this training camp that we're away on for 3 weeks abroad. That's a problem, because everyone then is a little bit on edge. So it's kind of things like that. But yeah, it's a big question. I don't know exactly the answer. That's how I think I would tackle it.
But what keeps coming up there in relation to elite sport especially is a lot of the athletes probably fall on one side of the line than the other, and that line is, I'll do it if it helps me. Mm-hmm. So then sometimes what they have to do to help themselves is to not do anything, to just switch off and recover. Mm-hmm. But it's always, what's next, what can I do more? And that sounds like, from what you've just said there, that's something that you dealt with as an athlete.
Yeah.
In terms of like, I'll do anything to get better, so I'm going to do everything.
Yeah.
How do you identify what the most important things are and then focus on them? And how do you help athletes to know when to switch off and to switch off as well?
I suppose, basic 101 goal setting, if you're trying to identify what are the things that are going to benefit my performance, because there's so much stuff that you could do, and it's a case of, it becomes a case of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, or do you actually prioritize what I need at the moment? And we found that with say new athletes who maybe have moved on to the carding system, or who have moved from development to senior and now have access to all the supports. Maybe us as a support team have to identify, well, what's the most pressing support need for this athlete? We can't throw everything at them. They've gone from just having a coach to having access to every support in the institute. We're not going to throw psych, nutrition, physiology, S&C, all of these supports suddenly at them. So what are the things this person needs? Well, maybe they have a tendency for niggles and colds and coughs and flus because they're busy with college. Okay, so maybe nutrition and physio is key for them. And then down the line, we start introducing the other supports. And that's the same with how you're doing it with athletes. Like, what are the key things, performance profiling? What are the most important aspects of your sport, for you to be improving or to be performing at the highest level? What at the moment are you consistently doing well, and where are the gaps? And that's usually where it is. It's kind of setting those goals based on what their needs are, kind of a needs analysis, rather than it going, well, everyone in my sport does S&C, so I should be doing that, when actually your body's not actually able to take on that extra volume at the moment. So maybe physio and prehab is what you need. So maybe that's the way you prioritize. So it's very much case by case basis. And there is a temptation sometimes for athletes to want to do what everyone else in their sport's doing. It's like, well, I should be doing that, or I don't want to be doing that. But yeah, it's hard. It's not hard. I think it is very much just sitting down with each athlete and really identifying what they need, rather than what we think they could be benefiting from. Sometimes we found if we throw too much at someone too early, they try to do a little bit of everything and nothing is at the level you want it then.
Are there any principles that you would adhere to then, in terms of session by session adding new things to? Because like, I know in sessions I try to adhere to the principle of 2. Mm-hmm. So like, only 2 new things per session can go in, and I think that's even quite aggressive. I think you could probably just say, we'll build session by session 1 new thing at a time. And some people might think that's slow, or it's not accelerated, but at least you get to focus on what's new.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm sure you've had athletes come into you and they're like, well, I'm going to do goal setting, and I'm going to do some breathing work or breath work, and I'm going to do this before bed and journaling in the morning. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you reel them back in and allow them to actually focus on what is achievable and manageable for them?
By just telling them what is achievable and manageable. So, because we usually what guides what strategies I will do is based on what their needs are. So I don't go in and say, okay, today we're, mental skills training, like today we're going to learn about breath work. Usually it comes based on what they need. So if they come in and say, okay, it's performance anxiety related, sometimes I deliver no strategies. A lot of it is just talk. It's kind of offloading, venting, working through problems. So they may not have gone away and had any specific mental skills strategy, but it's something that they needed to talk through. Maybe it's concerns about the training environment or, interpersonal relationships and how do I manage this or how do I approach this issue. So it might be, this is kind of maybe practicing how you're going to approach this conversation with this person. But then in other situations, it could be, okay, performance anxiety related to an upcoming competition. Then it could be, okay, here are all of the different things you could try. But I think in your situation, I think breathing and journaling is going to work really well for you. What do you think? Do you want to give it a go and come back and see how they've worked? And then we can build on that. Because like that, I think you kind of nearly need to have one or two strategies for that athlete in certain situations, because maybe they feel, okay, breathing, if that didn't work, I have nothing else and I'm not seeing her for another 3 weeks. But feeling there's kind of like a little bit of a mental toolbox that we're adding to all the time. That's what I always think of it. It's like, I've given you a few different things, got to try them in training, see how they work, but think of this as your mental toolbox. None of these are going to be the one size fits all. So you need to go and try all of these. But like that, don't give 3, 4, or 5 because they walk away going, okay, when am I doing this and what? Yeah.
How does that approach differ from what you would have done both in your own career and in your early career as a sports psychologist?
In my own career, I didn't see a sports psychologist because I was studying it, so I knew it and I knew better. And it's still it's probably one of the biggest regrets that I have is not seeking it out. Like I went through an awful lot of injury during my career, and it wouldn't have stopped me getting injured, but it probably would have made me reconsider maybe some decisions I was making, trying to rush through rehab or pushing to get back too soon and kind of feeling that time pressure, or just how I dealt with injuries in general probably would have been better. So yeah, what I've learned is what not using sports psych can do for your performance and how beneficial it can be. And I can say that, look, I didn't use this and I know where I can now see how it could benefit. And then in my early career, I tried to do it all, but I tried to do it like chapter 1 of textbook, then chapter 2, okay, I'm going to start. And I tried to be too prescriptive and I learned pretty quickly it doesn't work that way. So like that, had to be okay with sometimes, I haven't given this athlete, there's some athletes that I actually gave maybe no real strategies that were kind of from textbook, chapter 1, chapter 2, mental skills. But that's not what they needed. They needed to offload and to vent in a kind of non-judgmental, kind of a little bit separate from their kind of key sports stakeholders and their family. They just needed that outside voice to just vent to offload, to talk through things. So that was what they needed. I need to be okay with that, rather than always kind of trying to guide the conversation to be like, but tell me about your competition preparation. What's your routine? And that's not what they needed. If they wanted to look at that, or if I kind of saw there was an in, maybe. But often that wasn't the case. And I think it took me a while to be okay with that being the case, that it wasn't a case of like you go in and you guide. It was very much, that motivational interviewing. They lead. You maybe guide the conversation, but at the end of the day, the athlete's the one in control and you're just trying to guide it to understand better. So that took a while a lot of it is being okay with maybe not saying much or not feeling like you've done much, because it's not a quantifiable improvement like it in the gym or on the track. So being okay that there may not be a quantifiable improvement in this person, but their coach is saying they're much more relaxed now this week and I'm noticing improvement in their mood, and I'm like, okay, great. So that was a big learning curve, and that was probably the hardest thing.
It sounds like more so than okay, it was uncomfortable for you to not be in control of the strategies, to just be silent and listen.
Yeah.
That is hard.
Yeah. And do you know what it was? Is you're listening, but your brain is constantly thinking, how am I going to introduce this? And actually being okay with not having an answer. actually took a while as well, because, an athlete will say their bit and then they look to you. And I always felt I had to have an answer ready. So there was sometimes early on, especially, I felt I wasn't really listening, because it was like, you're telling me, but I'm already trying to formulate the answer, instead of kind of sometimes being like, you know what, I'm actually not sure, but let's talk about that. Or let me go away and have a think about that, because it's a really good question and I'm not sure. And being okay with,
Not
knowing and not being the extra. Like, it's that, what is that, Dunning-Kruger effect? The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Absolutely. And I think that really definitely showed, where I was like, okay, they're coming to me and they want stuff, so I need to give them stuff.
That's
and
on
I need
page
to give
97.
them the answer. Yeah, and actually being okay with, like, they don't expect me to always have the answer, and that's okay.
But you're in it together.
Yeah, and I think because I'm in it longer now, and I've probably developed quite good relationships with athletes who I've been working with for a while, that's okay. And sometimes just talking to me is just, sometimes it's like it's just a chat. If you're to ask anyone, they come away and they go, God, what did we, what do you work on with Jessie? Like, I don't know, we just talk. It's kind of like a coffee conversation. It's a chat over coffee. They mightn't even realize sometimes. Sometimes they come away and like, yeah, I have definite strategies. And sometimes there might have been strategies discussed without them realizing, or that was just a chat. I don't know what I actually work on with her, but it helps. So I keep coming back. But yeah, that took a long time to get okay with.
But you have developed really strong relationships with those athletes. And some athletes that I've actually had in the podcast have said that they've worked with you and they see great benefit in it. And then obviously now working in Santry, you see a lot of athletes that are going through injury and rehab. How often is it that you say to yourself internally, oh, I see a little bit of myself in the way that they're dealing with that?
So much. Yeah. So much, you wouldn't believe. And you know what it is? It's a lot of the bad habits that I had. I'm going, you're doing that. And not like really bad habits that are really detrimental, but just that kind of pushing to be back too soon, and always being like, do you have a time on that though? You said 6 weeks, and I'm coming up to 6 weeks, and I'm not where I said I was, but I did that a lot. And that's probably why I was constantly in cycles of rehab, or just different things, getting distracted, getting caught up with, like, someone told me that this is a good thing, so I'm probably going to try that. And you're going, oh my God, I did that. I was doing acupuncture and all sorts of stuff that, like, now my husband, who's an orthopedic surgeon, is going. But at the time, someone I knew got benefit from it. So, when you're an athlete, you'll try things because you hear someone gets the benefit, and you're desperate, and time is you're under pressure time-wise. And now I'm on the other side of it. I can really resonate. I can understand with an athlete's coming in going, I just want the injection. I know there's risks, but if I don't compete this summer, I'm going to lose my funding, and so you're quite torn in those situations, because, like, I've been there and I know that desperation. But I'm also coming from the side that, like, do you really understand those risks long term? I know these competitions now are important, but what's your long-term career? So yeah, I'm seeing a lot of that at the moment in the institute. But then in Santry, what's been, I suppose, a different challenge of working with kind of more the general public, with kind of helping them rehab post-injury, is getting used to them not having that big, wider support network, that I naturally jump to when they're talking about things, naturally kind of go, oh, that could be something for nutrition. I must tell them to go and talk to her. And then I'm going, they don't have that. Don't ask, and or maybe kind of trying to, because, have you considered maybe this could be related to this, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, there's definitely kind of the worries, the concerns. I think it doesn't matter whether you're an elite performer or you just do park runs on a Saturday. Like, if your identity is anyway tied up with your sport or your activity, which mine was a lot, it's a really challenging time to be injured or to be going through a slump in performance. And I'm seeing that with the patients in Santry and with the athletes, that, like, wanting to be back, wanting to do what I love doing, wanting to do that thing that fulfills my identity, that is the social aspect, is really, really challenging. And that's what I probably struggled with a lot myself as an athlete. So I can see it and I can really resonate, I suppose, with it. But I can also see what that can do. Is that identity, wanting to get back to that, can push you to unhelpful behaviours of trying to push past the rehab, or disregarding it altogether, because you're like, what's the point of me just doing this little small exercise 5 times a day, 6 times a week or whatever? I'm not seeing progress between now and tomorrow. and not recognizing the progress they made since last month or whatever. But yeah, I see a lot of myself in different people that are coming in, unfortunately, but not the good stuff.
But if you were to frame it in a positive way, which my athletes are probably sick to death of me doing, like, and I would be very similar in terms of my injuries and whatnot. I would say to myself, and maybe it's something you'd say to yourself too, at least I know what not to do.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's so
I've been there.
valuable
Yeah.
as a practitioner now that I'm saying I was, but I was an idiot back then.
Yeah.
Like, and I made so many mistakes, but they've served me later on in my career as a coach that now I know, okay, I actually know what that guy's feeling and I know why he's doing that. And I know what that girl is thinking in regards to getting back ahead of schedule. And I know that she's pushing a little bit too hard in that.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I can spot maybe the risk factors or whatever early, and I can just question them and see what's going on, like, there.
For sure. Yeah, like the unhelpful thinking patterns that they can fall into. You know, I might kind of, you know, if I kind of say, you know, how's your self-talk around this situation? And they're going, God, I don't know. And then I kind of might say, you know, this is what sometimes you might see. You might have one negative thought and that suddenly grows into more and more and more. And sometimes I am referring to kind of the way I would have thought in the past. And you can see you're like, pennies dropping, but that's exactly what I do. And I'm like, I know, because it's really common. Injured athletes or people in a slump or people who are under pressure do that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The things that I haven't, that, you know, it's been really valuable to learn from. Unfortunately, I just wish I had done it better at the time and I didn't have to learn those lessons, but so be it.
But, like, if we had done it fantastically well, we probably wouldn't be as good at our jobs now.
Yeah,
that's
maybe.
the way I try to frame it anyway. It's like Gabby Agbonlher was talking about Roy Keane as a coach, or was it him? But, well, somebody was talking about Roy Keane as a coach, and they said he used to just get so frustrated because he couldn't understand why they couldn't do what he could do.
Yeah.
So if you're an amazing athlete, sometimes it can be difficult to understand why everybody else can't be an amazing athlete too.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
But in relation to measuring success, because I've heard you speak about how it is difficult in your job, and that sounds like it was one of the reasons for your discomfort in sitting in and not offering advice or having an answer to everything. How do you determine success now in your role? Is it those connections and those relationships that you develop with the athletes? And then obviously I've said that a lot of your athletes speak really well of the work that they do with you. So I would say that that's a really valuable measure of success.
For sure. Yeah. Like there isn't, you know, you can do your numerical metrics and you can send them feedback forms, but I think, you know, you could say, oh, if they keep coming back, it's probably a bad sign because they become reliant. But, you know, you can kind of recognize if someone just wants to speak to you versus someone who kind of sees you as a crutch. But yeah, I think as there's good relationships, like, you know, it's a lovely bonus if someone speaks positively, you know, publicly, or word of mouth has happened that someone they know has gotten in touch. So those kind of things. But I think, you know, feedback either, you know, sometimes I might get a text from an athlete to say, you know, I had a really good training session today. That thing we were chatting about really helped. That's positive. That's, you know, sign that what we've spoken about maybe had an impact. How much? Hard to say. But they have acknowledged that the work we did had some positive benefit. And then I suppose feedback that you're getting from their support staff as well. Maybe their coach is saying that, like, I'm noticing they're definitely not as stressed as they used to be in the run-up to competition, or mood is better, or whatever. You know, they're noticing a change that would probably relate to the work we've done. If that's been noticed by someone outside of them, that's a good sign as well. So yeah, it's the kind of fluffy, soft kind of skills that you know, rather than it being getting those numbers, getting those improvements that are measurable, numerical, but
they don't have to be fluffy though. They're skills.
They are still skills.
Soft skills, hard skills are both skills.
Absolutely.
They're just different skills.
Yes.
So
I'm comforted in the fluffy. I'm comfortable in that
100%,
space anyway.
Yeah, it sounds comfortable.
Yeah.
In relation to the athletes that come to you then, generally you've talked about a mental toolbox.
Yeah.
So it's something that you can add to and something that you can build. Do some athletes that you work with ever initially not really have that much of a growth mindset in relation to mental skills? And is that a common characteristic of the ones that are successful, are the ones that say, my resilience is something that I can work on. My ability to come back from injury and stay positive and stay realistic is a skill that I can work on. Is that something that you see often? Are most athletes growth mindset anyway? Or is there still a stigma around, like, you can't train mental strength? It's just...
No, I definitely think there's less of that stigma, definitely with the athletes I'm working with. Like, I'd always see that kind of idea of like growth and fixed mindset as like a spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think every athlete sits somewhere on it. I suppose you might get them on a really good day after a good performance and a good season where nothing went wrong, and they might have a great growth mindset, but actually then there's a few things. So is it that maybe that, not that they're not resilient, but their resilience has been really tested, and maybe their self-awareness of how resilient they are is lower. Like, I think every athlete, like most of them have a belief in their ability to get better. I think the mental skills is the one they just come in, I think, more confused as to how I can improve this. I think it's not necessarily a belief that I can't do this. It's more a case if they're coming to me, they're going, I just don't know how I do this. I'm noticing I'm always get to this at this stage of a competition, at this stage of a season. This is now the pattern I'm noticing, and I just don't know what to do. And it's nearly, they just don't really know how mental skills. And sometimes it is just, often I'm just offering different perspective or those simple strategies. They're going, God, I never thought of it that way. So I haven't come across a huge amount of resistance when someone's sitting in front of me that they're going, I'll never be able to change this. But they might say, they might accept that this might take a while or whatever. But no, I definitely haven't noticed anyone in a while. There's some, I will say there's some.
What about in relation to not them themselves? Because they're obviously in control of what they can do. But what about coaches? Have you heard anything from coaches ever around like, well, this person is this way and they're going to be that way? And maybe you don't say anything in the moment, but you just take a little mental note of it.
Yeah,
And you think like, okay, well, I am going to focus on this type of communication or this type of wording with things so that the athlete doesn't think that.
Do you know what's interesting? I suppose because most of my work is done in a one-to-one situation like this, that like I have to be very aware that the athlete's perspective that I'm getting is their side.
Yes.
And sometimes, you might get that kind of suggestion from a coach or coaching team because they see them in a very different environment. And I'm going, God, I actually wouldn't have thought that from that person. But they're saying, no, this is the way they are in a group setting, or this is the way they are under pressure, or this is the way they are when it's coming into the stressful part of the pinch points in the season. So it can be really, that's where those meetings are really important, because you can see why a coach might be like, but this is what they're like. This is all I know of them. I haven't seen the vulnerable side that you get to see, but I haven't seen them in their normal environment either. So I always have to be aware that there's like the athlete's perspective, the coach's perspective, and the middle, somewhere in that middle ground, don't know, depending how close it is to the coach or the athlete. So you might have it that an athlete, sometimes they're a little bit resistant and they're, I'm not getting much out of them. And the coach just says, actually, they're just really not talkative. It's not that they're being resistant. They're just quite shy. Or else the coach is going, no, you'll get nothing out of them. They're an absolute diva around the place or whatever. But yeah, it's rare that I've come across someone who's completely against it. If they haven't come in my door.
Yeah, that's true.
They're not going to come in the door.
That's a benefit, I guess.
Yeah.
You're not going to come into contact with the people that
Which
don't
is a
believe
shame,
in
because
what
they're
you
probably
do.
the ones that could do with it.
True.
And I can't tell you how many times over the years there have been people who've been resistant. Suddenly they're going, you know what? Haven't tried this. Maybe I should.
Yeah.
And then they're the ones who often get really good benefit as well. So
The trouble is they usually do that when everything else hasn't worked, and they're like,
yeah, or this is the last thing, and then there's a lot of pressure on your the work you're doing. But
but I guess it's only pressure that you put on yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll move on to quick fire questions.
Oh yeah.
The first one is proudest achievement to date.
Do you know, I was having to think about this last night, and I was sitting with my husband being like, I actually can't say there's one. And I know I probably should say the Olympics in London. It's actually not my proudest achievement, which seems really strange. I loved being an athlete, but I never, I don't look back now and think getting to the Olympics in London it wasn't that it wasn't a proud achievement, because it's an amazing achievement, but getting there, I got there on a relay, and I feel that I didn't put in the same amount of work as I did to get to Rio, which I didn't get to, for example. So if I had gotten to Rio, it would have been on the back of 4 years of really hard work and every decision made for that. So I was thinking about what is my proudest achievement. I know it's not a quick fire, but it's probably getting the job in the institute and still being there and getting to work with athletes and seeing them progress, because that's based on, I suppose, not just doing the thing that I loved and getting good at it, but that was actually having to put work in, having to go through interview processes, having to be kept, so there was something proud in that because it was based on the work that I put in and something I didn't really enjoy, which is the academic side, versus athletics, which I just love doing and then happened to get really good at it. So I'd say more the proudest achievements has probably been getting this job, because I didn't get it on the back of being an athlete. I got on kind of on the merit of other work I did.
Did you feel that pride immediately, or is it only on reflection and hindsight?
I think immediately, because I remember when I was interviewing, I was going, God, what do I have to offer here other than my athlete background? But, sometimes I kind of assumed that everything that I got was having been an athlete. And when I got the job, I was really proud to kind of, because it was my first proper job that I gotten after being an athlete. So, on reflection, I realized that I definitely am proud, but I don't really think about it on the day to day. But when I got it first,
maybe you should.
Yeah, but it was nice. It was a nice way to reflect. So thank you for asking. Okay.
Favorite athlete of all time?
That one I really struggled with. I don't.
A lot of people do.
Yeah. I could be, my mind goes straight away to Usain Bolt because of the entertainer that he was. It's not, okay, he was groundbreaking in what he did, but I love athletes who bring their personality, and especially to athletics, because it is a minority sport and we do get overlooked until the Olympics rolls around every year. But he was the one who really put it on the map and made people want to be interested in the people, in the athlete, and also made people realize that athletics can be fun even at that top level. He was high-fiving people walking into an Olympic final and then broke records. He just kind of epitomizes what athletes can be. So I think, watching him is always a joy, even watching back his old stuff. Now, is he my absolute favorite? I don't know, but he is the one who, when I was thinking, always kept coming to mind.
What's the biggest thing you've learned in the last 12 months?
I actually think, I was thinking about this again yesterday, and probably that I'm more goal-oriented than I realized. So I got married last November and thank you. And after I retired, I realized that I fell out of all my good habits. So it's probably being goal-oriented and the importance of me having good habits and routines. Because when I wasn't an athlete, I didn't have any kind of structure, routine, or habits, and I fell off the wagon with all of them. And I didn't train, nutrition went out the window, and I allowed myself for a while because I was like, oh, I've retired, it's fine. But that allowance went on for far too long. And then when I was getting ready for the wedding in November, I had this kind of big goal of, not even that I wanted to fit in the dress, but I wanted to feel really good. This is going to be the most photographed I'm ever going to be. I want to feel really good and look my best on the day and be kind of that glow from within kind of idea. So my nutrition was really good. I was back training regularly and I was feeling really good about myself the way I used to when I was an athlete. And since I got married, those habits have all fallen off the wagon again. And it's made me really, when I was reflecting, I was like, how much good habits for me, if I fall out of one good habit, everything kind of follows. So for me, it's training, nutrition, sleep, work, all of those things are interlinked. So when one of those drops off, and I think it's definitely the training one for sure, has such a good knock on all the rest of them. So that made me reflect and realize that actually, this is something I've learned the last 12 months, that I need to be much more disciplined with myself, because when I don't have that goal, it's very easy for me to fall out of those habits.
Were you very black or white as an athlete?
In what
sense? Good or bad?
No, I actually wasn't. But I think I just really valued routine and structure more than I realized. And I don't think I realized it because I just always had it. Someone else just gave me a structure. Yeah. So I fit my day around my training sessions, and all my decisions were based on that. So what time I was eating, going to sleep, all of that was based on, because this will help my performance. And this is, I'll feel better at training tomorrow. And because I didn't have that reason to feel really good about something, it was like, it doesn't matter if I stay up a bit later. It doesn't matter if I have that. But it kind of, I think this year is that time I really realized that I was like, God, I really do. If I don't have as much discipline as I think I do, if I don't have that big goal to work towards. So that's probably been a big reflection for this year.
Well, you do have some sort of schedule and structure. So the last question before you get away to your meeting is, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
I think I would tell my 18-year-old self to knuckle down and work. Because when I was 18, I just started in UL. And the Olympics was not on my radar at that stage. Like, I was a good athlete. I was grand. Nothing, not like setting the world alight, and certainly didn't see myself going to the Olympics in London, maybe Rio, if I was to go to any of them. But I enjoyed my time in college, maybe too much. So college suffered. You know, I didn't really have the confidence then to really put the work in and consider myself an athlete, because I was like, this is not really a future for me. This is just something I do in the evenings. So if I could tell my 18-year-old self, was like, actually, there is some huge goals that are coming your way. Knuckle down now. So I could have, you know, been kind of performing at a higher level earlier. So that made that journey to London a much more solid journey. Would have made me qualify maybe individually in the 400 hurdles, not just as part of the relay. And not just, but like I got in the relay, not in the event I was aiming for. You know, if at 18 I had known how close I would have come, would I have changed my behaviors? Probably. So yeah, I would have probably told 18-year-old self to have a bit more confidence that you're going to be good and knuckle down because you're going to be good.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a million for coming on, Jessie.
No worries. Thank you.
Fantastic chat.
No, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.